Before the video starts, I want to take a quick moment of silence for those who lost and sacrificed their lives in the 9/11 attacks. Thank you. Now on with the video. Welcome to the tailgate. We had a pretty interesting week of college football, to say the least. We had some upsets, some really close games, just a lot of big stuff. So let's recap that, and we'll start with our 5 biggest winners of week 2. One of the first winners I'm going to go over is Washington State. Now, going to this game, I thought Wisconsin was going to win. I just thought they were a better team. They looked good on the rushing attack in week 1. I thought they had what it takes to beat them after what happened last year. But I was wrong. Washington State played really good on both sides of the ball. Cameron Ward started off really good as he had 2 touchdowns early in the game. And then their defense held on from that point. The big reason that Washington State was able to win was that they just contained Wisconsin's rushing attack. Their 2 big running backs for Wisconsin, Braylon Allen and Mel Lucy, they only had about 70 total rushing yards. They didn't even get 100 total. So that was a big reason that Washington State won that game. So with that and that hot start from Cameron Ward, Wisconsin just had they really had nothing to do. They couldn't win the game. With their major point of their offense down, they couldn't do anything. So it was a really impressive win for Washington State as they upset Wisconsin for a 2nd year in a row. One of the next big winners for me is Miami, as they had a rematch with Texas A&M this year, this time at Miami. Apparently that made a huge difference, as the big reason Miami won was Tyler Van Dyke playing like his life was on the line. He had 370 passing yards and 5 touchdowns against an SEC defense, which is just crazy. I mean, Miami was down 17-7, but then after that point, Miami outscored Texas A&M 41-16, which is just crazy. Miami had that big kickoff return touchdown to expand their lead, and once Miami got up 2 possessions, Texas A&M really couldn't contain that offense. Miami just got really hot after the first quarter. Tyler Van Dyke balled out. So we just all that, A&M, you just couldn't get the win again. Very impressive win for Miami. I don't know if I'm completely sold on them yet, but they definitely look way better than last year. And if they don't make a bowl game, then yikes. The third big winner for me is Iowa, as they reclaimed the Cy Hall Trophy after beating Iowa State in their rivalry game. There's not too much to look over in this game. Iowa got off to a 17-0 start, as their offense played pretty alright, and then they had that pick 6 to get up 17-0. But they started to falter for the rest of the game, as Iowa State made it a close game. Now, Iowa's defense did get back in shape, and they got that 4th down stop to win the game and stop Iowa State's comeback. But again, I mean, Iowa's defense is great. We all know that, but it's just the offense. I mean, it's impressive. They really only do need 20 points to win most of their games, but it's just so weird to look at Iowa. Their defense is one of the best in the country for the last I don't know, 20 years it feels like. But their offense is always so bad. But you win a rivalry game, you're one of the big winners. And Iowa is 2-0 in the season, so gotta give them props. Their defense looks amazing, and their offense does look slightly better, but we're noticing a trend where they're kind of faltering in the second half of games. The 4th big winner for me comes from one of our 2 ranked matchups, as Ole Miss took down Tulane at Ullman 37-20. Now, I was at that game, and I know, of course, the big thing is, what if Michael Pratt played? Ole Miss's offense didn't really look all too good until maybe halfway through the 3rd quarter for the rest of the game. Jackson Dart played good the whole game, but Judkins really had a slow start. I think through the first half he had negative rushing yards. They really couldn't get anything going, but in the second half they turned it around. They came back after they were down by 10. They were down 17-7 at one point, and they won 37-20. I mean, they outscored them 30-3 the rest of the way. It's still an impressive win for Ole Miss, but again, like I said, it's just interesting to see. I mean, if they play like this against a battered up Tulane team, how are they going to play in these SEC teams? But they won a ranked game on the road, so it's still impressive. and that's why they're one of my big winners, as they just looked pretty good in the second half of that game. For the last big winner, it's no question, it's Texas. They play lights out at Bryant-Denny. I was wrong about that. Quinn Ewers is that guy apparently. He balled out, he tore up Bama's defense. I didn't watch much of the game as I was unfortunately driving back from Tulane, which was a long drive. That traffic was crazy. But regardless, I kept my eye on it. Texas, they got up to that really good 13-3 start. They were keeping Bama's offense in check, but then it looked like they were going to choke it as they were down 16-13. My bad. But then we had kind of a back and forth game, but then Texas sealed the deal with that deep pass at the end to win the game, basically. Texas looks really good. They look like they're back. I mean, I said it in my preseason prediction. If they beat Bama, I think they're officially back. They have some tough Big 12 games, but after that win, I mean, it's hard to say they don't go undefeated, honestly. If Quinn Ewers is that good and he improved that much, then they're legitimately one of the best teams in the country, and I really think there's no question after this win. So for me, I think Texas is the biggest winner overall in week 2. But now it's time to get on to the sad part. It's time to get to our 5 biggest losers of week 2. There were a lot of big losers in week 2, but narrowing down to 5 is pretty tough. I think there are some pretty easy ones, as one of the big losers is Baylor. They played Utah at Baylor, and they looked to rebound very nicely after they had lost to Texas State. They were keeping Utah's offense in check, and I mean, it looked like they just had a win in the books. They were up 13-6, but then Utah drove down the field, they scored, and then they scored again very quickly, so it quickly went to Utah's favor. At one point, Baylor had a 90.7% chance to win this game. Utah's really showing just how weak they are without Cam Rising, that they need him back immediately. And Baylor had a chance that without Rising to get that big win and rebound after that terrible week 1 loss, but they choked it. Utah had that very quick 14-point scored, and after that, I mean, Baylor controversially fell short in their last drive, and so it's 2 really heartbreaking losses for them. So it's really weird to look at this Baylor team. I mean, how good or just how bad are they? But that loss to Utah makes them one of the big losers for week 2. Another pretty easy one for me was Texas Tech. Now, similar to Baylor, they were trying to rebound after a really bad loss to Wyoming, and it looked like they were going to do it against Oregon. Going to the 4th quarter, Tech was up 27-18, but in that 4th quarter, Oregon changed the game pretty fast. Tyler Show for Texas Tech had a really rough night, as although he had about 350 yards of total offense, he had 3 picks. That last pick was a pick 6 to seal the deal, as Tech was driving down by just 1 point, and then Oregon made it an 8-point game and practically sealed the deal. Texas Tech has definitely been very disappointing to a lot of people, as I brought up in week 1, me and a lot of people thought they were going to be really good, and now they're 0-2 with 2, again, heartbreaking losses, losing to Wyoming in overtime and then blowing it to Oregon. It really sucks to see just how Tech is playing, especially with the expectations they had. Maybe they can rebound in week 3, but again, choking it similar to Baylor, that makes them one of the big losers. The 3rd big loser for me is Nebraska, as they had a reinvigorated rivalry game with Colorado, as Colorado had entered the rankings, and with that and a big crowd in Boulder, a lot of people were thinking that Nebraska could pull off the upset. I mean, a lot of people were really getting tired of this Colorado hype. I'm not yet, I'm enjoying it, but it would definitely be very interesting if Nebraska just ended the hype right there in week 2. That did not happen. Nebraska got destroyed. Colorado won 36-14. Shedeur Sanders, again, played an amazing game. Travis Hunter was all over the place on offense and defense. Nebraska just had no answer. They were embarrassed on national TV. I know they're on the road in a big crowd, but still, I mean, they were a big upset pick, and they disappointed badly. Colorado looks pretty good. We'll see how they do in the Pac-12 play, but Nebraska's really looking tough and pretty iffy with first-year coach Matt Rule. For the fourth loser, I was really stuck between Wisconsin or Tulane, but due to the big injuries Tulane had, I can cut them some slack. So for me, the fourth loser is Wisconsin, mainly their running backs. Again, the rushing game has been a big part of Wisconsin for probably their entire history, and it looked like it was going to be huge in week 1 as both Chez Mellosi and Braylon Allen had over 120 something yards. And that's what I thought was going to be the big reason they would beat Washington State, but they did not show up. Braylon Allen had only 20 rushing yards, and Mellosi had 49 rushing yards. He did have a touchdown later in the game, but when you look at the stats, the yards per carry was not great, and that's primarily the main reason that they just didn't beat Washington State, as the rushing attack was not there. Cameron Ward had more yards than Braylon Allen on the ground, which is just not good, especially with how good Braylon Allen is from what we saw last year. So it's really disappointing to see Wisconsin get upset back-to-back years. So that makes them one of the big losers for me. The last big loser is Bama, as again, Bama had a big sellout crowd against Texas, and Bama didn't really show up. They showed up in the middle of the game as they were coming back and had a lead against Texas, as they were up 16-13. But that was really about it. Texas had the lead for most of the game, mainly in the beginning when they were up 13-3, and at the end when they got the last touchdown to make it 34-24. Bama's DBs could not contain Texas's wide receivers, and they couldn't stop Quinn Ewers at all. Jalen Monroe played pretty bad. He had 2 pretty bad picks, and his completion percentage was just over 50, which wasn't really good. He's definitely very questionable. It's definitely hard to see if he can replace the last few great Bama quarterbacks. The speculation does look pretty true. This looks like probably the worst Bama team Saban's had since probably 2007. You know, that year they lost to Monroe, which was really bad. I still think Bama's going to be pretty good. They're, of course, going to be an SEC contender, but that is a really, really tough loss and really puts into question just how good this Bama team is. But they are my last and biggest loser. And with that, it's time to go into our final section, the top 25 comparison. Now for the polls on the left side are mine, and then you can see the fancy ESPN one is right here. You can pause to check them out if you like, but now it's time to discuss them. When it comes to my top 5, I still have Ohio State at number 3, and that's because, I just think the talent they have, especially last game too. I think they looked pretty good against Youngstown State, especially with Marvin Harrison Jr. back. So I'm not willing to drop them down to the 6th spot like the polls did. So that's there. With Bama losing, I now have Florida State in my top 4 as they're right at 4. And I don't think Texas is a top 4 team just yet, so I have them right outside there with 5. Because with that big win, I really do think they're better than USC, as USC just doesn't have that big win yet. So USC does drop to my 6th spot, but yeah, overall that's my top 6. And of course, nothing's changed at the 1 and 2 spot, as I think most people can agree that Georgia and Michigan are the 2 best teams. Maybe Florida State or Texas has changed that with their big wins, but I still think those are the 2 best teams right now. Looking through the 7th to 11th place, it's mostly the same. I do have Utah in my top 10, unlike the polls. I had them top 10 at the beginning of the season, and that hasn't changed. Even though they have struggled against Baylor, I don't think that was enough to drop them out the top 10. The only major difference in my polls, I think, is that I have Notre Dame in my top 10. The big thing for me when it comes to putting Notre Dame over Bama is that after that loss, I don't really know Bama's a top 10 team anymore. Now, do I think they can beat Notre Dame? I think most likely they would beat Notre Dame. But with how Notre Dame's really looking these last 3 games, especially with how they looked in the 4th quarter against NC State, I think they gave me enough confidence where I can push them into that 10th spot. And just with how bad Bama played, I really don't know if Bama's a top 10 team or not. Now, we'll see as the season goes on, but as of right now, I think 11 is a good spot for Alabama. From the 12 to 20 spot, there's really not a lot of changes in my polls. Now, of course, there are some differences in that placement from mine to the AP poll. Mainly is that I still have Clemson ranked and have them ranked a lot higher as the polls drop them out of the rankings entirely. Like I said, I still think Clemson's all right now. Yes, they did struggle with Charleston Southern for a half, but after that, they beat them 66-17. So I didn't really find much reason to drop them any lower or to completely drop them out of my rankings. Especially with, like I said last week, where I said I don't think Clemson is worse than North Carolina, especially with how bad North Carolina played with App State. I think it kind of evens it out. And of course, I still have Duke ranked really high, but my polls are basically the same in that stretch from last week. Of course, there are slight differences with the AP poll, but my polls themselves don't change too much, as there really wasn't a lot of big upsets in that middle of the pack. The bottom 5 of my polls are really where the last few differences are, as I have Ole Miss ranked 21st, where the polls have them ranked 17th. The thing for me is that I don't think the win against Tulane was that impressive, and also I had Ole Miss ranked lower than the polls did going to that game, as I had Ole Miss ranked 23rd compared to the AP having them ranked 20th going to that Tulane game. I still jumped Ole Miss up 2 spots, but I don't think the win was as impressive as it really could have been. So I had them ranked at 21st. I do have South Carolina, TCU still ranked. They won, so I had no reason to drop them. And I didn't also drop them because of the 2 losses with Wisconsin and Tulane losing. They were the teams that I dropped out of my polls. And to round out my rankings, I have Washington State at 24th compared to the AP at 23, and Iowa shares the same spot as the AP and me both have them at 25, as they are 2-0, and they were a team that a lot of people were thinking that they were pretty good. I had them right outside my rankings, maybe like right at 30 or something like that, but I think those 2 wins, especially with it being a rivalry game, I think that was enough to bump them into the rankings, as I'm not fully set on teams like Miami and UCLA, like the polls have them ranked. Mainly because I don't think UCLA's wins were that impressive yet, and for Miami, I don't think Texas A&M was a ranked team going to that game. So I still think it's a really good win for Miami. I think one more win, and I will definitely put them in my rankings. But for the time being, I'm still not fully set on them. But that's the comparison of the polls. If you want to look at mine, again, you can pause to look through them more. But that wraps up my comparison of the polls. So yeah, that's the Monday video. Like, favorite, and subscribe if you had. I'll be back Wednesday to make a prediction video for these week 3 games. But that's the end of it. I hope y'all enjoyed.